it's a privilege to actually be involved in this in a way, because I know I was around at the beginning, and I think the business of social science has always been a bit of a struggle in the early days, and it was a bit like the Indigenous side of things. It was sort of a struggle for us as well, and I know the social science side of it is something for me that's always been important. Simply because of the things like the dollars that were spent on our country was always used against us in different ways, where if we looked at the actual social impacts and the values that came out of those dollars was never really recorded in the past. So it is good to see these things happening now. So I'll try and get on with this talk, but I know that I wasn't going to be talking about myself. But I suppose there is a little bit here where I've been involved for about 30 years in the reef side of things. In the early days, I was involved in a thing called Seafoil, and that was a 30 traditional owner group from Cooktown all the way down to Fraser Island came together, and that was way back. And that process for me was my beginning of the journey, I suppose, being involved in the Great Barrier Reef. But as a traditional owner, I'm a saltwater Murray, and I learned to swim when I was about 4 years old. So, it's always something that's been there with me. Fishing, I've been a professional fisherman, I've been a barra fisherman, prawns, been around a bit doing those sort of things. So I've got a bit of an idea of what's out there. So for me, my journey, it sort of started way back. And if I go on with the presentations, maybe I'll be able to talk a bit better. Okay. So here we are, and I know we're talking thousands of years here, and really one of the things that we'll talk about is the fact that we walked this country in the past. And I'd just like to point out that, this is something that we have to look at, because there is a lot of people that have been around in this journey for a long time. And also I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners from this country, the Wurrukuba and the neighbours, Binville. Thank yous. And as we heard, the history there as far as the Great Barrier Reef, it's a lot of country there, and it's something that, the business of the reef and the business of how it was formed and the threats and all that, we were never really considered or being part of all that right at the beginning. So it's something where, for us to try and get on board and be on this journey, it's sort of been a long story. And today things are a lot better, that's the truth, but it's still a lot to go. And, when you look at that map there, you're talking about 70 traditional owner groups. And, 70 traditional owner groups have been on country and know about the reef. And some of them have got stories about when that was land and you walked that country. So it's, there's a lot of information there, but it wasn't captured in the early days. And as we've seen, there's a lot of things happening, and it was actually, the values of the marine park were recognised, World Heritage, but even then, Indigenous cultural heritage wasn't recognised. And it's taken a long time still to get there. So it's, one of those things where we try to actively be involved and get in lately, but in those early days, I know there are places where I've been involved for a few years with the reef as well, with the Reef Authority, and some of the things that we've done, we've tried to make a difference, but it's always been a battle. And sometimes it's not so much the authority, it's more the government. It depends on the flavour of the day. And I did speak about how we walked this country. And if you look there, that's what it looked like thousands of years ago, before with the ice age and the sea rise about 20,000 years ago. And you're looking there at places where we actually walked this country. And we went out there, and we're probably at the edge of those edge of the reef nowadays, but those locations, they might have actually been middens where we sat down and ate our food right next to the actual water. And then those middens might actually become a reef. Who knows? I'm just speculating there. But it's quite easy to say that, because if you start looking at some of the underwater business now, underwater mapping and that, in places in my country with the Fitzroy River, which is near Rockhampton, it changed its mouth about 4 times. But when you look at thousands of years ago, where the mouth of the river was, you can actually still see the sand dunes under the water. So that's a location for me in the future that could have a lot of cultural heritage, just the mouth of that river in the old days. So there's a lot there going on. And it's something, like I say, we've been involved for a long time. And the stories that we have, and even today I hear new stories about what's happening out there. And those stories are incredible. And some of them are things like Uncle says there's a fresh water out there on that reef. And, if the scientists didn't know about that, he'd be wondering what the anomalies going on with his research. So you have to know about those things as well. And there are things like wonky holes. They could have been water holes in the past. And there is a great talk on TED actually about Western Australia and how they found artefacts underwater and a lake. And that lake had a connection to an Aboriginal Dreamtime story that they were still telling today. And they hadn't seen that land or that lake for thousands of years. And I've tried to be a bit smart with these QR codes. So if anyone wants to follow things up, basically what you're looking at here is the reef traditional owners timeline. Now, I sort of grabbed this as far as I had to put something together last week for today. And if you're really interested, you could actually find this on the Reef TO's website. So I better leave it there for a second. I can see people still trying to catch that. So no worries. But otherwise, yeah, if you haven't got it, it's the Reef TO website. Okay, now we're getting into the history, and obviously, I've said a little bit there. We've been around thousands of years, but this is a little bit about the Queensland history here as far as the settlement and what's happening. And then 1901, like in about 100 years or so, we were dispossessed and taken off our country. Myself, our family, Wappa people, were taken off Konomi, Wappa, Keppel Islands. Were taken off in 1902 and were sent to different places. You didn't, like there was 2 sisters that didn't see each other for 40 years because of that process. They were 70 by the time they caught up with each other. I used to joke that I had relations from Brisbane to Cairns, but it's true, because they actually brought my people up here to Yarrabah and Cairns, and they've hit down to Cherbourg, down to Brisbane, down to Fraser Island. So we got separated everywhere. And most of my mob now in Harvey Bay. So it's just something that the impacts that have happened since those days is just incredible. And then you look at some of these sort of things as far as the acts. How many acts were we under? And they weren't for us. And then, here we go again, when we've just had that little bit of history as far as the side of it. And I just, the business of the Community Development Employment Project. Now, that was something where I felt like we were an experiment. Basically, the government decided that they would use a process to basically have us working on country on our own, or not on country, but on locations and reserves. Instead of getting paid the dole like everybody else, you had to go out and work to actually receive your income from the dole. And those early days, I think nowadays it's still happening in society where they've looked at similar things. And I believe that we were like an experiment with that process. I could be wrong. People could say that as well. But it is something that, these things have a big impact on our people and still do. And then, so, yeah, as you can see, there's a little bit there. But for me, you got 1988 there, the first Aboriginal person appointed to Grumpa, the Great Barrier Reef Consultative Committee. Then you've got the Commonwealth Employment Program, SAPANTRUM. Now, I know that acronym because I used to work there. Got funding. I walked into the Department of Environment and Heritage, I think it used to be called in them days. And I walked in and I just said that my country is Wappa, Great Keppel, and I want a job. And thankfully, they gave me work. I ended up working as a marine park ranger on my own country. So it's something where that sort of gave me a start. And it really made a difference as far as my life, because sometimes a business or where you want to go for the future and things like that can be very daunting. But for me, some of this, by doing this, it actually gave me a lot more strength. And I found out by looking into my past, it actually gave me a future. And then you got the Royal Commission into the Aboriginal deaths. Well, I won't go into that too much, but that's still a big problem that we have today. And here's the first person that was actually elected to that grumper, Les Maslow. And he's a very influential person nowadays in the UN. And, I'd like to point out that I was on that committee too in the old days under Russell Reichardt. Before the business of the IRAC, the Indigenous Reef Advisory Committee, which I was on for a while as well. But what I'm pointing out is sometimes these people that have been around in their voice, it really has made a difference for our people and the things they've done. And now we're in the United Nations, basically, having a storm. And Dr. Evelyn Scott. Very powerful person. She was the first person elected on the board, and it's sort of been a great sort of journey, I suppose. Yeah, she's a very strong woman, and the things that she accomplished in her life were astounding, honestly. And there's a great sort of legacy as far as the business of having Indigenous people on the board. And I spoke a little bit there back just about Sea Forum. And this is when, in the early days, the Sea Forum, we came together. And in those days, we had a ATSIC, Australian, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission. And we had a Queensland ATSIC and a federal ATSIC and things like that. But basically, the Queensland ATSIC supported this Sea Forum. And the 30 traditional owner groups from Cooktown down to Fraser Island all came together. And it all started over the business of being called together one day to talk about dugong plans, a management plan and a turtle management plan in Cardwell. And from that day, we just said we can't do that unless you're talking about both at the same time, the sugarcane farm down the road and everything else. How can we do a management plan and separations like that as far as turtle and dugong without including all the other aspects, even the cultural aspects? It wasn't included in the early days. So it's something that, for me, the first time that 30 traditional owner groups came together, it was very powerful. Everybody had the same vision, the same sort of goals. There was no disruptions in, it was really a great process and something that I was proud to be involved in. And here's a bit of the timeline back in 97, right through to June 2000. And those sea forums, it really was a process where we'd actually look at coming together. Then we'd elect a chair for the day or for the 2 days, whatever the meeting was. Then we'd talk through all those discussions and issues. And at the end of that, then we'd elect a working group to actually carry those issues on. That working group would then be giving a terms of reference from all the traditional owners in the room. That terms of reference that tells what those working group what to do. And really, it is something where, for me, it was I was on those working groups, and it was really good to be able to say no to anyone, government, land councils, whatever. If they wanted to talk to the Sea Forum, they had to call a full Sea Forum to actually get their view into the Sea Forum. They couldn't approach the working group and say, we want this and want that. We just say, no, sorry, go back to Sea Forum. So the working group was really strong, and they actually would do the work that they were told to do. And then the next Sea Forum, that working group would report back to the whole community, then stand down, and we'd start again. And it was something that I think it scared the government in a weird way, because in the early days, they used to call it people power movement or something like that. And they were actually thinking about having a parliamentary sitting just to figure out how to talk to us. And that's another story. I've always reckoned it's tons of money trying to teach you white fellas how to speak to black fellas, I tell you. So, yeah, it's something that, it really is something that made a big difference. And that Sea Forum, it's still today, people still talk about it. And from there, we ended up with another process, which I'll show you shortly. one of the things that did come out of the Sea Forum was a discussion paper. And in those days, we used to get all these government papers thrown on our desk and they say, we want you to respond and within 3 months or 10 days or whatever. And we actually made this paper and threw that on the government's table and asked them to respond. It took them 6 months. But it was a great paper. It was produced by the traditional owners, and I have to say, with a lot of support from CSIRO as well, definitely. And here we go, the zoning. It was quite an interesting time. I was actually part of the Reef Advisory Committee, I believe, at that stage, and zoning came in, and there was another partner, Phil Rist. He was there with me, and we're sitting in the room now, and all the scientists are fighting over their zones and which one they want to protect and which one's more important. And they kept mentioning this Mark Sand fella. And me and my mate said, "Who's this Mark Sand?" Now, we didn't figure it out till later, but that was the computer program that pulled everything together. But we were involved. That's the point, I suppose. We were involved. We tried to have a voice. Sometimes it wasn't that strong when it came to other issues on the reef, but we were there. And here we go, the TUMRA, the first traditional use of marine resource agreement. Now, Gourigan is definitely the first, but I have to say that Darumble, Wappleburra were the second. And, it's something that we've been around for a long time, these TUMRAs, and it is a great tool for our people to actually get out there and manage country and look after country. There's still struggles with the TUMRAs in different areas. I mean, TUMRAs don't go all the way up and down the coast. We still have to look at other areas and how we can support them with TUMRAs or similar processes so they can actually be involved, because even though TUMRAs are great, you still got this issue where your neighbour up the road hasn't got one and he's angry at you. How come you got it? Why have you getting it? And what's your, special favour? And Wappleburra is getting a funny name now. But, it is something that really made a difference, the old TUMRAs. And for me, it gave me a voice as well, to be involved more actively in what's happening in the reef. And also through that, I have to admit that sometimes the more you talk, the more work you get. But I actually ended up with a job then through AIMS, and very luckily I'm still there. And it's a really great job for me to be involved in as far as working towards empowering our people. And that's just me talking about me. But, that TUMRA side of it, it really is something that made a big difference. And I know one of the things about our TUMRA, I haven't kept track of times here, but one of the things about our TUMRA was that we were the smallest TUMRA. And we're actually located off the mainland. Our TUMRA just surrounds our islands. And so it was unique and different. But it really was great for the authority to still keep supporting the small TUMRA as well as a big TUMRA. And it sort of became something where if you had a really large TUMRA, we still had equal weight as far as the small TUMRA to be able to have a voice and look at resources. So it was great, really was. And these are those TUMRAs, and as you can see, it doesn't cover everywhere. And you've got this one, the Darumble TUMRA, right out to the reef, the Swains, at the moment, and our TUMRA's in the middle of that little one. But we try and have to work with our neighbours basically, and we work together, drain together, and there's a lot of things that in the early days before native title, I was Darumble. Part of the Darumble native title group for about 14 years, native title. But then native title changed everything, and next thing Wappleburra had their own native title. So I had to step out of one native title thing, and I had permission to speak from elders and everything, school, education, all around the district. And my traditional rights then changed simply because I had to deal with Wappleburra country and not Darumble country. So I'm still respected by Darumble, and I still get the odd traditional welcomes, even though on the coast, I still get asked to be involved. But it is something where the early days, the native title people, the lawyers sitting down talking about conflicts of interest, but they didn't consider my issue, my conflicts, how as an elder, I was allowed, 50 elders allowed me to speak on country. And then that all changed with a legal native title. And here's our latest Great Barrier Reef Marine Park board member, Stan Louis. And, you know, he's been around for a fair while from the Torres Straits and very, very actively involved. And as far as I know, he was involved with AIMS as well in the early days. So there's a lot of good things coming from AIMS all the time. Okay, now we'll talk about the Great Barrier Reef Foundation and the support and the different things that have happened there with us. Now, there was a lot of controversy with the Great Barrier Reef Foundation when they first received their 450 million. I think it was that money, but from that, they were the first sort of organisation to really empower traditional owners to have a voice. And between the foundation and the program that I'll talk about shortly, the RAP and AIMS, we really have introduced FPIC, the Free, Prior and Informed Consent process with traditional owners when it comes to research on their country. And basically what it means is we have to show them everything that we're going to be doing on their country, and then we ask their permission or consent to actually work on their country. And they have the right to say yes or no, very simply, yes or no. And if it's no, we respect that. And sometimes it's no only because they're in native title and they're waiting for the committee to be formed. It's not a no, get lost. It's a no, we've got other issues to deal with. We've got kids, we've got problems, you know. So sometimes the priorities are different on countries. But yeah, through the foundation, it really made a big difference, honestly. And nowadays, traditional owners and the FPIC process and Great Barrier Reef is something where I believe we're leading the way in the world when it comes to FPIC and the process of engaging with traditional owners. Because at the moment, in the past and still now, we sort of sit in the back seat when it comes to a lot of these things, as far as Grumper and other places. And I know we are sort of still there, but with the FPIC process, the right to say yes or no doesn't apply with some other organisations. And that's another struggle. But, you know, I think the other thing too for me with this business is that there are a lot of great organisations out there, universities, the authority, everybody out there is really great in what they're doing, but I believe that there's an issue with the business of engagement. At the moment, most of the organisations might have some people with goodwill in them to actually look at trying to make a difference for our people, but the organisations are in don't have the policies or the budget to back it up properly. And I mean, you know, policy from your top up to say we are going to engage, and the budget to make sure that it might take 6 months to engage, not 6 weeks or 2 weeks, which is normal sort of process. So it is something where, you know, we're really going to have to look at sort of trying to make differences there, I think, really. I know that, you know, I've sort of get thrown into different places and positions. Crown of Thorns, you know, the POTS, RAS, yeah, RAS, traditional owner, anyway. Too many acronyms, but I was the chair and I had to learn anyway. But it's something that's once again empowering our people, because we are developing a thing called the biocultural risk assessment framework. And basically what we're looking at with that framework is that for traditional owners to have that as one of their tools in their toolbox to actually help them look at the issues that might happen if they accept a project or anything that's happening on their country. So they can actually turn around and add value to that process where they'll see the negatives, but they'll also see the positives. They'll see the advantages, there might be work, other things like that. So it is something that before they sit down then and make that decision, they've already got all that in mind. They've already assessed that before they sit down and looked at the project. And what have I got? Oh, yes, just some more information there about what is happening with the foundation. And it really is empowering. You know, it's pretty hard to just put things up on a piece of paper and a PowerPoint display. But behind that, you've got families, you've got school kids, you've got uniforms, you know, there's all these other things that our people sort of gain out of these projects and processes, not just a job. They actually support their families and their kids going to school, all sorts of things. Because, most of us, unfortunately, society-wise, it's sort of we're down on the bottom end of the rung there when it comes to employment, and most of us might live on the dole. And, I've been there, no worries, I know what it's like. You've got to, you're guilty till you prove yourself innocent with that process, I tell you. And here's the different pillars that the foundation set up in the early days. And it is something where, I was involved, like I say, the Crown of Thorn Starfish and the Reef Restoration and Adaptation Science Traditional Owner Group. And it is something that it's a pretty powerful sort of process where we've got CSIRO in the room, we've got authority, we've got foundation, aims, and the traditional owners. And we all, it's something that we work together and there's respect for each other. And yeah, this is the RAP side of it. I won't hang around, you can find that later. And I did talk a little bit about this. And yeah, it is something where they really have empowered our people. And I suppose it is sort of a process where AIMS has really taken this on board very seriously. And it's not only just the Great Barrier Reef, but we are applying this right through the whole of Northern Australia. I know there's still a way to go. We still have to educate a few of our people as well. The business of FPIC process hasn't been applied everywhere, but we are sort of making sure that we're trying to go back and look at those sort of processes that are happening in the past to try and look at FPIC for those things. And things like maybe the long-term monitoring plan that the reef does. We haven't got FPIC for that. But we inform the traditional owners that they're going to be there on your country. We actually give them a flyer to let them know that this boat's coming on your country. And usually what you find is that the business of a boat being on country was talked about 6 months ago. And the FPIC might have been approved 6 months ago, and the boat goes out on country. And I myself, as I used to be on the Tumra side of things, or still am, I don't like the fact there's a boat out there and I don't know what it's doing. And I get asked, what's this government boat doing here, Bob? And I don't know. And that's a big embarrassment. So we send a one-page flyer to our traditional owners just to remind them, and they can put that up in the shop. They can tell their people. And if someone said, what's that boat doing? Oh, that's AIMS. We talked about that a while ago. So it's really just a little thing like that is very empowering. And I tried to put AIMS into one slide. Yep. Okay. Yeah, no, it's very hard. But really, AIMS very serious about the process. And as you can see, what we've got here, we've got tiers there as far as the bronze, silver and gold. That's about letting our researchers know what level of engagement needs to be done when they actually have a project. And so bronze is more about just taking photos or using satellite and desktop, but you still have to acknowledge the traditional owners. Silver, you're getting more serious and you have to have FPIC. You have to go and engage, sit down and talk, and have to have FPIC. And, some of the projects we've got asked questions, how many star pickets are you going to put in the ground? So you have to tell them everything so they know. And the other thing, even like we had coral rubble at one stage there, and one of the traditional owners wanted to know how much we were going to collect. And then they were concerned about cultural heritage. It's something that's never really been looked at properly with the Great Barrier Reef is underwater cultural heritage. And I've already said from the beginning, we've walked this country. So there's a lot going on. And, my early days with AIMS, there was only 3 of us there. Now there's 18 of us. And AIMS are very serious in this process and how we engage. And I know we're talking the reef in Australia, but there's also the Pacific now, which is sort of another area where we're looking into. And this is something we're proud of. This is the Reef Reach Futures program. And basically, we've got traditional owners out there now, the rangers out there harvesting coral spawn and learning how to actually use that coral spawn and doing the right process, identifying it all. Then once it's ready, to take it back out onto a site and let it settle. And, that's something that originally We've got about those 10 traditional owner rangers, different ranger groups. We've got another program coming up this year. We've had to cap it at 40. All the traditional owners, rangers want to be involved. And it's all about traditional owners getting out there and managing country. Okay. So I did want to point out a lot more, as you can see. This one here, the Reef TO, I think is important. It really is something that carries on from the old reefs, this whole sea forum, and it's about traditional owners now deciding how they want to manage country, with the Reef Traditional Owner Task Force actually guiding that at the moment. So it is something that's great. And yeah, I have to acknowledge everybody, and I won't go for too long with that, but I definitely acknowledge everybody here in the room. And I know there's a lot of people that know me as well, and I know a lot of yous as well. And it's really great to see you all. But I think we've got to start getting this message out to everybody else, I think. And here is a video, whether you like it or not, for another 6 minutes.
This is a call for action and change. The time to unite is now. The voice of traditional custodians must be heard, now more than ever, as the destructions to the sea community are immense and continuous. She wants to heal, but is struggling to recover from overwhelming threats that carry over from the past, unfold in the present, and loom into our future. The capitalist notion of sustainability is not working and needs to be challenged. We need to stop dancing to the beat of profit and start moving to the rhythm of Mother Earth. We need to reassert an authentic, sustainable backbone and rebalance our priorities between people, planet, and profit. Restorative justice is needed to repair relationship between humans and nature, focusing on empowerment to change and the collective action to address past injustices and promote the hum of a truly equitable and sustainable future.
Embedding this rhythm into Australia's sustainability agenda is not a new song. It is a remembering, it is a return, it is ancient, tested, and alive. It is also strategic, necessary, and well overdue. A truly sustainable marine future must begin with this understanding that sea country is kin, not resource. Our law, our science, our management, and our governance are guided by this truth. Country encompasses everything that the whale sees on its journey as it travels from the Antarctic to warmer climes and from surface waters to ocean depth. It includes land, sea, air, stars, rocks, plants, animals, all living and non-living things. She is our spirituality. She is us. The spirit of the whale songline sets forth where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their cultural ecological knowledges are recognised as leaders and equal partners in the stewardship of country and all its inhabitants.
Ancestral knowledges and practices can continue to shape and protect the ecosystem and their functionality if given their rightful place in forming marine policy and regulatory framework. This is much more than an integration of knowledge. It's a recognition that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have always been holders and scientists of water country. Caring for nature is not a research project. It is a sacred responsibility, one that requires humility, reciprocity, and long-term commitment. Our knowledge is not data to be extracted. It is a way of life grounded in relationships, ceremony, and law. We call for the establishment of two national bodies, a National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Marine Science Institute with regional hubs, and a National Indigenous Peak Body for sea country.
Together, they will provide the essential foundation of cultural safety, First Nations-led platforms for training and empowerment of the next generation of Indigenous marine scientists and custodians, ensuring that our young people can walk into science without leaving culture behind. and they will be an epicenter for collaboration with conventional Western science marine researchers, while all partnerships are underpinned by cultural integrity, mutual respect, and a commitment to shared goals. They will also provide a nationwide platform to ensure Indigenous voices and their messages are heard in key decision-making forums and are unwavering in national policy advocacy and reform.
Like the barnacles carried by whales, the spirit of different waters travel across sea country, connecting places, people, and knowledge through migration and movement. We are reminded that caring for nature is not isolated work. It is a shared and continuous responsibility carried across generations, cultures, and geographies. We ask you not to accept our knowledge, but to walk with it, to unlearn what silenced it, to make room for a future that listens deeply, restores honesty, and respects what has always been in motion. Sea country, and for those who care for it. We invite all Australians to stand up and join us on this journey of healing, restoration, and collaboration. What we choose now will shape not only the health of our oceans, but the kind of country we become.